Hi. I know I missed yesterday's show. I hope you did too. The reason was my computer went down. And I have a backup computer, but it took it 5+ hours to update. So here I am the day after. Now, this is not a show, this is an editorial. Periodically I do this, and I know on the bottom of the screen it says Mr Moohead. And that's to decredentialize myself. Alright? I'm the guy who says he's a cow who's on the internet. Hi, Cindy. I can see when people are hanging out in the chat. Again, this is not a live show. This is a live editorial entitled Dear Mr. Dorsey. You see, Cleveland Browns fans are an interesting, suffering lot. We've seen it all, especially if you've been a fan as long as I have, which is like 50 years of my life. I've seen it all. From the departure of Jim Brown to the arrival of Mike Phipps to the arrival of Brian Sipe and the departure of Mike Phipps. I go by quarterbacks. To the departure of Brian Sipe to the USFL and the arrival of Paul McDonald. And then the lost years until Bernie Kosar joined the Browns in 1985. And then all the hell breaks loose. And when all hell breaks loose, we lose the team. The next thing you know, the Ravens are the former Browns, and everything is gone to hell in a handbasket. So, here's what I can tell you. Oh, Cindy Sanders is saying that Austin Corbett has been traded to the Rams. Great. Mr. Dorsey, I'm not a cow. I'm sure you can see that. And I'm not a guy who futzes around on the internet. I owned businesses, and they were profitable businesses. And I'm not an average football fan because I'm more interested in the inside of what's going on in a business than I am the product that goes out on the field. Sure, it's fun to watch, but besides that, what I've seen over the course of my years is gross mismanagement, ownership failures, ownership moving the team, new owners coming in and being not ready, the sons of new owners being unable to get the job done. And then we get Jimmy Haslam. And Mr. Dorsey, you knew when you took the job that Mr. Haslam has a reputation for being a meddler and not knowing what to do in a football sense. And you allowed him to hire Freddie Kitchens as your head coach on a football team that looked like it had all the promise in the world. So now we're where we're at. I've been trying to be nice on the show and try to point out the direction that things are going, but, you know, fans being fans and management being insulated, nothing gets done. So I'm coming to you, Mr. Dorsey, to ask you a question. One, if you did the right thing, would Jimmy Haslam simply fire you because Freddie Kitchens is his choice and it is basically a condition of your employment? Because this is killing the Cleveland Browns football organization. No panelists today. This is an editorial. Mr. Dorsey, I've been watching week after week in the press conferences, your head coach explaining, well, we got to be better. I got to be better at calling plays. And now here we are, 6 weeks into the season at 2-4, and the last 2 weeks, as disappointing as they could be, and he's still saying that he could do a better job of calling the plays. The first thing I want to ask you is, why is he calling the plays when he has an offensive coordinator? That's the first thing. And two, if for 6 weeks in a row, by his own admission, he hasn't done very well with it, Why is he still calling the plays? The next thing, and it's being brought up by people in the chat room, have to do with Rashard Higgins, but I'm not even going to go to him first. I'm going to go to his most recent comments, Freddie Kitchens. Freddie Kitchens is talking about a team, not a group of individuals. And he's always said, we got to be in this together. But now he's throwing people under the bus. And now the players are coming out, and we're finding out how much rancor and disorganization there is in Berea. When asked about the Browns, this is from Cleveland.com, and this is a direct quote from Freddie Kitchens. When asked about the Browns' red zone struggles, Kitchens revealed that one wide receiver freelanced and didn't follow the game plan. Here's his quote. One route yesterday, I have no idea where that route came from, and it's one of our staple routes, he said. We need to do a better job of doing what we're supposed to do. The motto today is everybody just do your job and do not worry about anybody else's job. Just do your job. So now Freddie Kitchens is going to the press and not naming the receiver, but saying one of three players went rogue in the offense. There's Callaway, there's Landry, and there's OBJ. You can't blame his whipping boy Rashard Higgins. He wasn't on the field for one single play. But it isn't just one wide receiver going rogue. It's Myles Garrett deciding just to jump the snap count and go off sides constantly. There's a lot of things that I'm seeing of people going rogue and not being good teammates. And you know who's responsible, Freddie? And you know this, Mr. Dorsey. The buck stops here. If the players have tuned out the head coach, you've got the wrong head coach. You can't play the game without players. I don't think I have to explain this to you, sir. You can play the game with a different head coach, but not with no players. This notion of everybody just do your job, then why don't you just go to Freddie and say, we've given you 6 weeks to call better plays, and you keep going in front of the press and saying, you're not calling good plays. Would you turn it over to Monken? We are paying him as an offensive coordinator. Or, if Monken isn't capable, why did you bring him in? What was the point? The sad thing about Freddie Kitchens is, like anybody who is basically moved up into an organization far above their ability and competence, is that we can't go back in time and say, Freddie, just be the offensive coordinator. And he may have been a really good offensive coordinator. He might have been the right guy for that job, but we never found out because I believe, Mr. Dorsey, that Mr. Haslam gave you an edict to hire him as the head coach without any experience, knowing that the spotlight would be on Cleveland the second you started getting some big-name people on your defensive line and Odell Beckham Jr. And so you end up with a head coach who has no experience, and now 6 weeks into the season, he's lost control. Now, you see, let me explain something. You say, well, what business were you in, Mr. Moohead? Did you work in a garage? Did you own a garage? As I know, I owned radio stations. Well, then what qualifies you? And the answer is, I've seen it before. I watched Chris Palmer in 1999 tell the press that he was on a runaway train. He was fired shortly thereafter because he couldn't control the players. And this is the exact same thing that's happening in Berea today. The exact same thing. Now, you're saying, maybe you're blowing this up, Mr. Moohead. Maybe it's just not that big a deal. Oh, but it is. Because now, seeing as how one of these receivers went rogue, the guy who hasn't been allowed to play, Rashard Higgins, he's complaining that he's not getting a chance to play, even though he claims that he was healthy to play against the 49ers, but absolutely healthy to play on Sunday. When asked about Rashard Higgins, the story from Freddie Kitchens is basically, well, we activated him, but we never got to the plays that would utilize him. And that's Freddie who's calling the plays. You want to talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm sorry that I'm not looking in the chat room to see everybody's reaction. I'm looking at you, Mr. Dorsey, and asking you a question. A self-fulfilling prophecy like this, where somebody's answer is, we never got to the package of plays to use Rashard Higgins, when he's the one who's calling all the plays, is just his way of saying, I intentionally didn't call plays that would allow Rashard Higgins to play. When you come out in the press and give a bullshit answer like that, Mr. Dorsey, you know that Rashard Higgins is going to be upset, because he knows damn well that the plays were avoided that would have used him when he could have helped the football team. So now he's upset. You know that Odell Beckham Jr. has been upset. Most likely would be the guy who went rogue on the pattern, but we'll never know. Because you don't have the balls, Mr. Kitchens, to reveal who was the guy who freelanced. And if you're not prepared to discipline him publicly, why bring it up in front of the press in the first place? Why litter the media with your dirty laundry? Now, Mr. Dorsey, you know that things have to stay in-house, and you know feeding the bear is the worst thing you can do. But the bear's been fed, and now we know the second Freddie said that, Rashard Higgins came out of the woodwork and he started complaining. But there's more than that. There's more than that. It's a matter of players not doing as well as they should. Whose offense is this, Mr. Dorsey? Is it Monken's or is it Kitchens? We fired the last offensive coordinator because he didn't know which plays to pick, and Freddie did. But for what I can see this year, I don't see that anybody really knows which plays to pick, because the guy who's picking him week after week says he's not doing a good job, and Monken hasn't called a single play. I'm looking at Baker Mayfield regressing, which you can't afford to have happen with a good young quarterback. And he is a good young quarterback, Mr. Dorsey. But let's be accountable, too. In order to get Odell Beckham Jr., you got rid of Zeitler and you weakened your offensive line. And then you proceeded to bring in an offense, or somebody did, Mr. Dorsey, that required more time for the quarterback to throw. And now, your young prodigy quarterback is basically taped up on the sidelines with the head coach saying, oh, he's definitely going to play in New England, but he's already banged up after week 6, and he's taken far too many hits at that. The most important thing is that he's throwing interceptions at an alarming rate. He's not on the same page as the receivers. The receivers are not on the same page as he is. The scrambling that this guy used to do effectively is now ineffective. He doesn't seem to be able to find people open down the field. So, what does it all amount to? And I'm sorry about my phone, Mr. Dorsey, but there are a lot of people trying to get a hold of me. Unfortunately, not for the head coaching job of the Cleveland Browns. I'm kidding. All I'm qualified to do is what I'm doing right now. Now, I'm not angry at you, Mr. Dorsey. I'm just wondering, why the silence? Why is this allowed to go down this way? Why are you allowing your head coach to clue the press into something that is pissing our players off? I don't get it. You know, my personal feeling is this. As far as being a group and not a team, and this is at the heart of the issue. Freddie Kitchens is lamenting the fact that the Browns are playing like a group and not a team, yet look what he does. Would a teammate throw his own players under the bus? Instead of coming out and saying, well, I'm the one who's responsible, which he's been saying, now he's saying people are going rogue and not doing their job. I'll quote Freddie. The difference between a group and a team is significant. To be a team, you have to do your job, and then you bring it together collectively. Then you become a team, and you trust the guy beside you that's going to do their job. But here's a question, Mr. Dorsey. What if the head coach isn't doing his job? How is it possible to bring the players together? How do you assimilate a group into a team when the guy who's at the secondary top of the pyramid, and we know how it's supposed to work, Mr. Dorsey, it's supposed to look something like this. It's supposed to be Jimmy Haslam up here, but hopefully not involved, for Christ's sake. And then you have Freddie Kitchens, and then you have, whoever else is bending your ear. So if Mr. Haslam is just trying to win, he steps down and lets a qualified man like you, Mr. Dorsey, run the team. That is the way you build the organization as far as a management structure. However, if the team is acting like a group and not like a team, whose responsibility is it, Mr. Dorsey? I mean, certainly, if the sheep get out of the corral, you don't blame the sheep now, do you? You might blame the sheepdog, but not the sheep. And this is what I see. A head coach who's not calling plays well but won't give up the responsibility. A head coach who's complaining about his players being a group and not a team. And a head coach then who turns around and throws one unidentified wide receiver under the bus and Rashard Higgins under the bus by refusing to call plays that play him. What I see in Freddie Kitchens is a guy who wanted the position in his wildest dreams, got the position, and just it's too big for him. But he's a stubborn man who won't admit that he needs help. We got to give him help. If you don't let him go, you got to give him help. And he's got to agree to that help or not agree to the help. That's the way it works. And unfortunately, chances are he won't agree to it and he'll quit because he wants control of that show. And he's proving week by week that he can't do it. It's really a sad situation to be in. Jarvis Landry is frustrated because of the officiating, all right? Everybody is probably trying way too hard to make something happen, and the head coach is behaving the way that he's behaving. The Browns trading Austin Corbett might be another situation. The Browns admitted that he was a failed selection and they traded him for an undisclosed pick in 2021. He never hit the field. But I want to remind you, Mr. Dorsey, the last several weeks, neither is Denzel Ward, neither is Greedy Williams, neither is Rashard Higgins. We never saw what Austin Corbett could or couldn't do, but he's out of town now. And yeah, we wasted a number 33 pick, but I'm not convinced now that anybody who's not getting a chance deserved not to get a chance. The fact that you're starting Eric Kush and that he has the lowest rating, PFF rating, if you're into analytics, Mr. Dorsey, in the first 6 weeks as any offensive lineman around the league. And now you're looking at replacing him conceivably with Wyatt Teller after the bye week, so he'll get his first taste against Super Bowl championship competition. Now, I'm not going to sit here and look at you, Mr. Dorsey, and say you blew the number 33 pick, because that's not the point of this. I'm not convinced you did. I'm not convinced that Freddie Kitchens plays anybody but who the hell he wants to play, and he punishes those who aren't on the same page that he is. I think Rashard Higgins is on the same page as Baker Mayfield. That's what I've seen historically. Antonio Callaway sure as hell isn't. Your head coach is saying that Antonio Callaway is having good practice weeks. Have you seen it in a game, sir? I have not seen it in a game. So, what's a mother to do, Mr. Dorsey? Just listen to a fan who has seen a lot and a business person who has done a lot. You can't afford to let the genie out of the bottle. The press is going to nip at your heels. The negativity in the national press is now being empowered by Freddie Kitchens with the local press. The players are going to be reading uncomplimentary stories. They're reading about how their head coach now is basically giving one of them up as having gone rogue. When I take a look at the play calling, I'd say going rogue is insisting on a replay that you have no chance of getting overturned because of bad officiating, and stopping a successful play on 4th down at 1 just to get your way. I'd say that's going rogue, Mr. Dorsey. Team's got too much ability. The fans are too hungry to allow this shit, Mr. Dorsey, to happen all over again. That's really about all I have to say, sir. I really, certainly wish, with all my heart, that we would win or lose based on our ability. And I don't mean our talent, sir. I mean our ability. I certainly wish that it wasn't all this distraction and sideshow stuff. I wish we had experienced people at the top positions of the organization. You know, we thought we were finally rid of that. We thought the Sashi Brown era was over with, sir. And we bring this talent in and look what we end up with. A head coach who never coached before. And now look what we're getting. Look into it. It's the bye week. If you can't shut this down now, Mr. Dorsey, it's only going to get worse. The players aren't listening to Freddie Kitchens, and Freddie Kitchens is complaining about it. If you've ever seen the movie The Untouchables, Mr. Dorsey, you would remember Sean Connery's character, who looked at Kevin Costner, who played Elliot Ness, and said, "What are you prepared to do?" You, sir, what are you prepared to do? You're an experienced hand and you know the right thing. Do it. And if doing it means you lose your job, then you don't need this job. If this is Jimmy Haslam with his hand over this whole deal, you don't need him. You don't need Cleveland. You don't need Berea. You're far too qualified a guy to put up with that kind of crap. Make the call. That's it. Thanks a lot for listening. And I hope that something good comes of this. Take care. Bye-bye.